Ethan had not seen the world since he was a little boy. When he was just 6 years old, a rare eye disease slowly took away his vision. At first, it was just blurry images, then shadows, and finally, complete darkness. His parents tried everything: specialist doctors, treatments, even surgeries, but nothing worked. Over time, Ethan learned to live without sight. He memorized the number of steps from his bedroom to the kitchen. He used his hands to feel the texture of walls, furniture, and even people's faces. He learned to recognize voices, footsteps, and even the scent of rain before it touched the ground. Growing up, Ethan never wanted people to pity him. He hated when they spoke to him in soft, careful voices like he was fragile. He wanted to be treated like everyone else, so he worked hard to become independent. He learned how to read Braille, how to walk with a cane, and later how to navigate the city using public transport. His parents worried about him, but Ethan was determined to live a normal life. He refused to let his blindness stop him from dreaming. As he got older, Ethan discovered a deep love for music. He had always been fascinated by sounds, the way a violin could cry, the way a piano could whisper or roar. His parents bought him a keyboard, and within months, he was playing songs by ear. Music became his way of expressing himself. When he played, he felt free. The piano keys were like a language he could speak without words. Despite his confidence in most areas of life, Ethan always felt nervous about relationships. He knew he had a lot to offer. He was kind, intelligent, and had a good sense of humor. But he also knew that not everyone could look past his blindness. Some people were kind to him out of sympathy, and others avoided him completely. He wondered if he would ever find someone who loved him for who he was, not because they felt sorry for him. Then one day, everything changed. Ethan's best friend, Mark, introduced him to Olivia. Mark had met her at an art gallery and thought she and Ethan would get along. "She's different," Mark had said. "She sees the world in a unique way. I think you'll like her." Their first meeting was at a small coffee shop. Ethan was nervous, but Olivia made him feel at ease right away. She didn't ask awkward questions about his blindness or treat him differently. She simply talked to him like he was any other person. She told him about her love for painting, how she saw colors and emotions, and how she believed that true beauty could be felt rather than seen. Ethan was mesmerized. They began spending more time together, and Ethan quickly realized that Olivia was special. She didn't just describe things to him. She painted pictures with her words. She would take him to parks and describe the way the sunlight filtered through the trees, how the wind made the leaves dance. When they visited the beach, she let him feel the warmth of the sand, the cool touch of seashells, and the spray of the ocean on his face. With Olivia, Ethan felt like he could truly see the world, even without his eyes. She never made him feel incomplete. Instead, she made him feel like he was experiencing life in a way most people never could. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't just surviving, he was truly living. And without realizing it, he was falling in love. Ethan and Olivia's connection grew stronger with each passing day. What started as casual conversations over coffee turned into long walks, shared laughter, and deep discussions about life. Ethan had never met anyone like Olivia before. She didn't just talk to him. She made him feel like he was truly seen, even though he couldn't see her. One evening, they sat on a quiet bench in the park, the sound of leaves rustling around them. Olivia gently placed a flower in Ethan's hand and asked him to describe it. He ran his fingers over the soft petals, feeling the smooth texture and the gentle curves. "It's delicate," he said thoughtfully. "The petals feel thin, almost like silk. The center is rough, probably where the pollen is." Olivia smiled. "That's a daisy. It's simple but beautiful, just like the way you described it." Ethan chuckled. "I wish I could see it." "You don't need to," Olivia replied. "You already understand it in a way most people don't. You feel things, Ethan. You notice details others overlook." Her words touched him deeply. It was moments like these that made him realize how special she was. She didn't just accept his blindness, she embraced it as part of who he was. She never treated him like he was missing something. Instead, she made him feel like he experienced the world in a different, meaningful way. As the months passed, their friendship turned into something more. Ethan found himself waiting for Olivia's calls, smiling at the sound of her voice, and feeling the warmth in his heart whenever she was near. He had always been afraid that love might be impossible for him, that no one would ever want to share a life with someone who couldn't see. But Olivia changed everything. One afternoon, as they sat by a small lake, Olivia hesitated before speaking. "Ethan, have you ever thought about marriage?" Ethan was surprised by the question. "I guess I have," he admitted, "but I always thought it might be difficult for me. I didn't know if anyone would want to be with someone like me." Olivia turned to him, her voice firm. "Don't ever think that. You are one of the most incredible people I have ever met. You see the world in a way that most people never will. And She paused, then took a deep breath. "I love you, Ethan." Ethan's heart raced. He had imagined those words before, but hearing them from Olivia felt almost unreal. He reached for her hand, his fingers finding hers. "I love you too, Olivia," he whispered. From that moment on, their bond became unbreakable. They shared their dreams, their fears, and their hopes for the future. Olivia described how she wanted a small house with big windows, where sunlight could fill every corner. Ethan told her about his dream of playing music for a living, performing in places where people could close their eyes and truly listen. Then, one evening, under a sky full of stars, Ethan gathered his courage. With a small velvet box in his hand, he got down on one knee, though he had to rely on Olivia's laughter to know he was facing the right direction. "Olivia," he said, his voice steady despite his nerves, "I may never see the world the way you do, but I see you in my heart, and I know that I want to spend my life with you. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Olivia's eyes as she nodded, even though she knew he couldn't see it. Instead, she took his hands and whispered, "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." Ethan felt like the luckiest man in the world. He had found a love that didn't depend on sight. It was something deeper, something that could never fade. He couldn't see Olivia's face, but he knew she was smiling. And that was enough. As the wedding date drew closer, Ethan and Olivia were filled with excitement. Their love had grown so strong that nothing else seemed to matter. Ethan spent hours practicing a song he had written for Olivia, planning to play it for her on their wedding night. Olivia, on the other hand, carefully chose every detail of the ceremony, making sure it would be a day they would never forget. But then, something unexpected happened. One day, Ethan received a call from his doctor. "Ethan, I have some news," the doctor said. "There's been a new development in eye surgery. It's still experimental, but there's a chance it could restore your vision." Ethan was speechless. For years, he had accepted his blindness as a part of his life. He had never allowed himself to hope for a cure. But now, the possibility of seeing again was real. "There are risks," the doctor continued. "The surgery doesn't work for everyone. But if it does, there's a chance you could regain your sight." Ethan's mind raced. He imagined seeing the sky for the first time since childhood, watching the world come alive with colors and shapes. Most of all, he imagined seeing Olivia, the woman who had changed his life in so many ways. But doubts crept in. What if the surgery didn't work? What if it changed the way Olivia saw him? What if seeing the world after so many years of darkness was too overwhelming? That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He didn't tell Olivia about the call. He didn't want to raise her hopes if the surgery failed. He wanted to be sure before saying anything. The next day, he visited the hospital and met with the doctors. They explained everything in detail: the procedure, the recovery process, and the possibility that his sight might return slowly or all at once. Ethan sat quietly, taking it all in. He had spent his whole life adapting to blindness. The thought of seeing again both thrilled and terrified him. Finally, he made his decision. "I'll do it," he said. The surgery was scheduled 2 months before the wedding. Olivia still had no idea. Ethan wanted it to be a surprise. He imagined what it would be like to remove his bandages on their wedding day and see her for the first time. He wanted her to be the first thing he ever saw with his new eyes. The day of the surgery arrived, and Ethan felt a mix of excitement and fear. As he lay on the operating table, he thought about Olivia's smile, the way she described colors, and the way she saw beauty in everything. "If I could see anything," he whispered to himself, "I'd want it to be her." The procedure lasted several hours. When Ethan woke up, his eyes were covered in bandages. The doctor told him it would take time for his vision to return, but there was hope. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan waited patiently. He could sense light behind the bandages, but he didn't know if it meant the surgery had worked. The doctors said he would know for sure once they removed the bandages completely. Still, Ethan kept his secret from Olivia. He wanted their wedding day to be the moment of truth. He wanted to stand at the altar, feel her presence, and then, finally, see the woman he loved more than anything. As the wedding day approached, Ethan's heart pounded with anticipation. Would he be able to see? Would it all be worth it? He didn't know. But one thing was certain: his life was about to change forever. Ethan woke up early on the morning of his wedding, his heart racing with excitement and nervousness. Today was the day he would marry the love of his life. But for him, it was more than just a wedding. It was also the day he would finally remove his bandages and find out if the surgery had worked. He sat on the edge of his bed, running his fingers over the fabric of his suit, imagining how he would look. For years, he had lived without sight, learning to navigate the world through sound, touch, and memory. But today, there was a chance that everything would change. Today, he might see Olivia for the first time. His best friend, Mark, knocked on the door and stepped inside. "You ready?" he asked. Ethan smiled. "I think so." Mark helped him get dressed, making sure every detail was perfect. Ethan could hear the excitement in his friend's voice. "You're going to be a married man in a few hours. How do you feel?" Ethan took a deep breath. Excited, nervous, a little scared. Mark chuckled. "That's normal. Every groom feels that way." Ethan hesitated for a moment before finally revealing his secret. "Mark, there's something I haven't told anyone. Not even Olivia." Mark frowned. "What is it?" Ethan's voice was steady but filled with emotion. "I had surgery to restore my sight. The doctor said there's a chance it worked. I haven't taken off the bandages yet. I wanted to wait until today." Mark's eyes widened in shock. "Wait, are you serious?" "Ethan, that's incredible." Ethan nodded. "But I don't know if it worked. And I don't want to ruin this day if it didn't." Mark placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "No matter what happens, today is going to be special. Olivia loves you for who you are, not whether you can see or not." Ethan smiled, grateful for his friend's support. "I just want the first thing I see to be her." The wedding venue was filled with guests, all eagerly waiting for the ceremony to begin. Ethan stood at the altar, his hands slightly trembling. He could hear the soft music playing, the quiet whispers of the crowd, and the gentle rustling of fabric as people shifted in their seats. Then the music changed, and the whispers faded. Olivia was walking down the aisle. Ethan could feel her presence, even before she reached him. He could hear the delicate sound of her footsteps, the slight rustle of her dress, and the way the air seemed to shift around her. His heart pounded as she finally stopped in front of him. He took a deep breath. This was the moment. With trembling hands, he reached up and slowly untied the bandages. His heart raced as the fabric fell away. And for a moment, all he saw was brightness, blurry, overwhelming light. He blinked rapidly, his eyes adjusting. Then, shapes began to form. Shadows turned into figures. And finally, standing before him, was Olivia. His breath caught in his throat. She was more beautiful than he had ever imagined. Her dark hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders. Her eyes sparkled with love and emotion, and her smile was full of warmth and happiness. The dress she wore flowed elegantly, making her look almost like a vision from a dream. Tears filled Ethan's eyes. He had spent years creating a picture of Olivia in his mind, but nothing could compare to the real thing. She noticed his expression and whispered, "Ethan, can you see me?" He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. His throat tightened with emotion. All he could do was nod. A single tear slipped down Olivia's cheek, and she let out a soft laugh, covering her mouth in shock and joy. The guests gasped, realizing what had just happened. Ethan finally found his voice, though it was shaky. You are so beautiful." Olivia let out a small sob, then threw her arms around him, holding him tightly. "I can't believe this," she whispered. "This is the best day of my life." Ethan held her close, his heart full of love and gratitude. He had spent years living in darkness, but today he was stepping into the light, with the woman he loved by his side. The moment Ethan saw Olivia for the first time, he felt like his heart had stopped. His entire life, he had imagined what love would look like, what colors would feel like, and what the world truly held beyond the darkness. But nothing had prepared him for this. Olivia was even more beautiful than he had ever dreamed, and the emotions on her face told him everything. Joy, shock, and deep, endless love. The guests sat in stunned silence, watching as Ethan and Olivia stood frozen at the altar, lost in the moment. Then, a murmur spread through the crowd, followed by soft claps and teary-eyed smiles. Everyone had just witnessed something extraordinary. Olivia gently cupped Ethan's face, her eyes searching his. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Are you sure? Can you really see me?" Ethan let out a shaky breath, his hands brushing over her cheeks as if to confirm she was real. He blinked rapidly, adjusting to the overwhelming sight before him. "Yes," he whispered. "It's still a little blurry, but I see you. Olivia, I see you." Tears streamed down Olivia's face, but they were happy tears. She let out a small laugh, covering her mouth with one hand while holding onto Ethan with the other. "I can't believe this," she said, her voice full of wonder. Ethan couldn't stop staring at her. He took in every detail, the curve of her smile, the way her dark hair framed her face, the glow of happiness in her eyes. He had always imagined beauty in words, in emotions, in touch. But seeing it, truly seeing it, was something else entirely. The officiant, who had been just as shocked as everyone else, finally cleared his throat. "Well," he said with a warm chuckle, "I don't think anyone here will forget this wedding. But shall we continue?" A ripple of laughter spread through the guests, and Ethan and Olivia, still wiping their tears, nodded. The ceremony continued, but for Ethan, everything felt new. He had been to weddings before, but he had never truly seen one. He noticed the way the sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the floor. He saw the way Olivia's dress shimmered under the light. He saw their friends and family smiling, some dabbing at their eyes with tissues. When it was time for their vows, Olivia took a deep breath, her hands gently holding his. "Ethan," she said softly, "I fell in love with you without ever needing you to see me. You have always seen me with your heart, with your soul, and that has always been enough. But today, you see me in a new way. And yet, I know nothing has changed. Because whether you could see me or not, I would still love you with everything I have." Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat, his hands tightening around hers. "Olivia," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I never thought I would see again. I never thought I would witness your smile, the way your eyes shine when you laugh, or the beauty of this world you always described to me. But even when I was in darkness, you were my light. You taught me how to love, how to live, and how to see the world in ways that didn't need sight. And now, as I stand here, seeing you for the first time, I know one thing for sure. You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, and I will love you for the rest of my life." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. The officiant smiled warmly. "Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Ethan, you may kiss your bride." Ethan didn't hesitate. He gently leaned in, capturing Olivia's lips in a tender, love-filled kiss as the crowd erupted into cheers. The moment was perfect. The man who had once lived in darkness had stepped into the light, and in front of him was the one person who had always been his guiding star. After the ceremony, Ethan and Olivia walked hand in hand down the aisle, surrounded by the cheers and joyful claps of their loved ones. Every step felt surreal to Ethan. The world around him was still slightly blurry, but the colors, the faces, the emotions, it was all there, clearer than he had ever imagined. He had spent years relying on sound and touch to understand the world, but now he was experiencing it in a whole new way. As they stepped outside, the golden sunlight bathed everything in a warm glow. The sky stretched endlessly above them, soft clouds drifting lazily across the blue expanse. Ethan tilted his head back, taking it all in. He had forgotten what the sky looked like. He had forgotten the way the sun painted everything in a golden hue. Olivia squeezed his hand. "What do you think?" she asked, her voice full of curiosity and excitement. Ethan turned to her, his eyes locking onto hers. He was still adjusting to seeing faces, but he could already tell that hers was the most beautiful one he had ever seen. "I think," he said slowly, "that I never knew the world could look this amazing." She smiled, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "I'm so happy for you, Ethan." The wedding reception was held in a beautiful garden, filled with fairy lights that twinkled like stars. Ethan watched in awe as guests moved around, their laughter and chatter blending into the happy atmosphere. He recognized people by their voices first, but now he could match those voices to faces. It was overwhelming but wonderful at the same time. As they sat at the main table, Olivia leaned in and whispered, "Are you ready for our first dance?" Ethan grinned. "I've been waiting for this moment." The music started, and Olivia led him onto the dance floor. Ethan had danced before, guided by touch and rhythm, but this was the first time he could actually see the way Olivia moved, the way her dress swayed with every step. She looked radiant, like a dream come to life. As they danced, Olivia rested her head against his chest. "I still can't believe this," she murmured. "Just a few days ago, you couldn't see anything. And now?" Ethan gently placed a hand under her chin, lifting her face so he could look into her eyes. "And now I get to see the woman I love more than anything in the world," he said softly. Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes, but she smiled. "You always knew how to make me cry happy tears." Their guests watched with admiration, touched by the deep love between them. As the song ended, everyone clapped, and Olivia and Ethan shared a laugh before walking back to their seats. Throughout the evening, Ethan took in every detail, the way the candles flickered on the tables, the colors of the flowers Olivia had carefully chosen, the joyful faces of their friends and family. He was seeing all of it for the first time, and yet it felt like he had known it forever. Later that night, as they stood under the open sky, Olivia wrapped her arms around Ethan. "Are you overwhelmed?" she asked gently. Ethan let out a soft chuckle. "A little, but in the best way possible." She smiled. "We have a whole lifetime for you to see everything." Ethan gazed at her, memorizing every feature, every little expression. "I already have everything I need to see right here," he said, touching her face softly. She blushed, leaning into his touch. "I love you, Ethan. And I love you, Olivia." The stars above them shone brightly, but for Ethan, nothing in the universe could ever shine as beautifully as the woman in his arms. In the days following the wedding, Ethan's world felt completely new. Everything he had once known through sound and touch was now alive with color and light. Simple things, like watching the leaves sway in the wind or seeing his reflection in a mirror, felt like small miracles. Olivia stayed by his side through it all, guiding him as he adjusted to his sight. She found joy in watching his reactions, whether it was the way he stared in wonder at a sunset or the way he laughed when he saw his best friend Mark's face for the first time and said, "You sound much taller than you actually are." One morning, Olivia woke up to find Ethan standing by the window, staring outside. She walked up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "What are you looking at?" she asked softly. Ethan smiled. "Everything. The way the morning sun makes the rooftops glow, the way birds fly together in the sky, the way people walk with purpose. I never knew the world was this full." She rested her head on his back. "I love seeing you like this. It's like you're rediscovering life." Ethan turned to her, taking her hands in his. "I am. And the best part is, I get to see it with you." That day, Olivia decided to take Ethan on a small adventure. "You've seen the world through my words for years," she said. "Now I want to show it to you." They visited the park where they had their first date. Ethan marveled at the way the sunlight danced on the water, the vibrant green of the trees, and the way children ran across the grass, their laughter filling the air. They went to a small cafe, where Olivia had always described the cozy atmosphere and warm colors. Now Ethan could see the golden glow of the hanging lights and the soft hues of the wooden furniture. He looked at Olivia and smiled. "You were right. This place really does feel like home." As the days passed, Ethan started noticing little details about Olivia that he had never known before. The way her nose crinkled when she laughed, the tiny freckles on her cheeks, the way her eyes changed color in different lighting. He had loved her deeply before, but now he felt like he was falling in love with her all over again. One evening, as they sat on their balcony watching the sunset, Olivia turned to him with a curious expression. "Do you ever miss the way things were before?" Ethan thought for a moment. "I won't lie. It was easier in some ways. I knew how to live in the dark. And now I have to learn everything all over again. But if I had to choose between seeing or not seeing," he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, "I would always choose to see you." She smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "You always know exactly what to say." Ethan chuckled. "Maybe it's because I've had years to think about it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sky turned from gold to deep blue. The world was changing before their eyes. But in that moment, all that mattered was that they were together. Ethan had spent years imagining the world, but now he was truly seeing it for the first time. And no matter what challenges came next, he knew one thing for sure: he was exactly where he was meant to be. As weeks passed, Ethan grew more comfortable with his new reality. Each day brought fresh experiences, and he embraced them with wonder and gratitude. The world, once a mystery hidden in darkness, was now filled with colors, light, and movement. But with sight came new challenges. Ethan had spent years relying on his other senses to navigate life, and now everything felt unfamiliar. He often found himself overwhelmed by crowds, distracted by too many details, or struggling to recognize objects quickly. One afternoon, while walking through the city with Olivia, he stopped in the middle of a busy street, feeling disoriented. The movement of people, the flashing lights, and the fast-changing environment made his head spin. Olivia noticed and gently placed a hand on his arm. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern in her eyes. Ethan took a deep breath. "It's a lot to take in. I thought seeing would make everything easier, but sometimes it's too much." She squeezed his hand. "You don't have to figure it all out at once. You've spent years understanding the world one way. It's okay to take your time." Ethan nodded, grateful for her patience. She had always been his guiding light, and now, even though he could see, he still needed her in ways he never expected. One evening, as they sat together at home, Ethan turned to Olivia with a thoughtful expression. "You know what," he said, "for years, I imagined what you looked like, and now that I see you, I realize something." She raised an eyebrow playfully. "What's that?" He smiled. I wasn't wrong. I may not have seen you before, but I always knew how beautiful you were. Not just in how you look, but in the way you love, the way you care, and the way you see the world. Olivia's eyes softened, and she reached for his hand. You always saw me, Ethan, even before your sight came back, and that's why I love you. The days turned into weeks, and soon it was time for their honeymoon. Olivia had planned a trip to a peaceful countryside retreat, far from the city noise. As they arrived, Ethan stood in awe at the sight before him. Rolling green hills, a sky painted with warm hues, and a small wooden cabin nestled among the trees. This place is perfect, he said, taking it all in. Olivia grinned. I knew you'd love it. During their stay, they explored nature together. Ethan marveled at the sight of birds soaring through the sky, at the way the morning fog settled over the fields, and at the beauty of the starlit night. One night, as they lay on a blanket under the open sky, Ethan looked up at the stars, his hand intertwined with Olivia's. You always told me how beautiful the night sky was, he murmured. I used to listen to your descriptions and picture it in my mind, but now that I see it, I realize your words never did it justice. Olivia chuckled. I guess some things can't be described. They just have to be felt. Ethan turned to her, his heart full. That's how I feel about you. No matter how many times I say I love you, it will never be enough to describe what you mean to me. Olivia smiled, her eyes shining. Then don't say it. Just show me. Every day. Ethan gently cupped her face and kissed her, sealing a promise without words. His journey from darkness to light had been filled with challenges, but through it all, one thing remained constant, Olivia. She had been his world before he could see. And now, even with sight, she remained the most beautiful thing in his life. As they lay under the vast sky, hand in hand, Ethan knew that no matter what the future held, he was exactly where he was meant to be, with the woman he loved, in a world he was finally able to see.